What are 6 project management tasks as a project manager in consulting? Hi, my name is Johannes Niari. I'm a project manager in strategy consulting, and today I want to share 6 tasks that you have to do as a project manager in consulting. And in a previous video, I talked about how I became project manager, and I also shared some tips on how you can become project manager. You can look it up here. And in this video, I talked about 3 skills that you need to master as a project manager. The one was leadership, the other one was sales, and the third was project management. And today I want to share 6 tasks that you need to do as a project manager in terms of project management. So let's jump directly into it. Let's jump into task number 1, and this is that you have to manage the problem solving process of your project. And this is the most important task that you have as a project manager in management consulting. You see, a consulting team is always hired to solve a business problem for the client. So the success of a consulting team always depends if you find a solution to the problem of a client and therefore make the client happy. So it's your job, and this is really the main job as a project manager on the project, to make sure that this process runs smoothly and is successful at the end. So a typical problem that you could solve would be that the company wants to become more profitable, and then you can start the problem solving process, and you always have 3 steps. First, you structure it, then you analyze it, and then you communicate it. And as a project manager, you don't have to do all the steps, but you have to coordinate them and make sure that every step is done in a proper way. So for example, the first step, the structuring, here you need to make sure that you really understand the situation, that your team understands the situation, and then you need to structure the problem in the right way and derive the right hypothesis. Once you go into the second phase, the analysis phase, then it's your task to make sure that you come up with a good analysis for each of the hypotheses that you developed, and make sure that all the analysis are done in the right time. And last but not least, third step, the communication. You're also responsible for all the meetings that you have, for the main communication touch points like steering committees, and of course the final presentation where you communicate the results. So this is also part of your job, that you make sure that this runs smoothly and that this entire process is successful. So as I said, you're not responsible for doing everything, but it's your responsibility to make sure that this process runs smoothly and successfully. Then task number 2 is the planning of the project and the resources. So you have the problem solving process, and of course you need to plan the entire project in terms of to know exactly where to do, when to do what, when to do these meetings. What I always like to do is to plan the entire project from meeting to meeting. So I say, okay, we have a project, let's say it lasts 12 weeks, and let's say every 4 weeks we have a steering committee. Then I would start, drawing out the steering committees, and then really plan from steering committee to steering committee. And this is a principle called managing or planning from meeting to meeting. And this is really important because in consulting, it's so important to have a good client relationship and to really make this your focus point, because every of those or each of those major client touch points determines if your project is successful or not. So this is the structure that I typically use, and this is also how I map out the project plan. So I think, okay, what do we have until what kind of meeting, and then make the timely planning. Of course, you also have to plan and manage your resources. You have to think about, okay, what do we have to do in order to achieve the goal? And then you have to say, okay, this is the kind of competencies and resources that I need. And then you allocate this task to your team members. Of course, it's your task to distribute the right task to the right people. What I often see is, that people who are very creative, for example, get tasks where they have to do, all the Excel work, or, that people who have the strength in the analytics side, do very creative tasks. So I always recommend to think about, okay, what kind of personality types do I have in a team, and how can I allocate my resources? Another thing that is very important is that you also ask for more resources if necessary. So you are responsible that you keep track of the question if you have the right competencies in your team and the right resources. So maybe you need more consultants because you say the workload is too high. Maybe you need some experts, then you have to take care that you have the right experts on board. Maybe you want to have a couple of more interns on the project because you need more support. It's your responsibility to flag if you have bottlenecks, and this is also part of the management of your resources. Then task number 3 is that you ensure a high quality of the project work. And again, you cannot do every task, but it's your responsibility as a project manager to ensure a certain level of quality. You will never be in a position where you can avoid 100% of the mistakes. Small mistakes just happen, that's just part of a project, but at least you should try to avoid the most and the major mistakes. And for that, you can implement some systems. And I think there are 4 main things that you can do to ensure the quality. First is to introduce checklists. So you can write down the most common mistakes that you have, or most probably your team has your own checklist. Then you can distribute those checklists and work with those checklists if you see that the quality is too low in your project. So for example, a checklist with the most common Excel mistakes, most common PowerPoint mistakes. If you share that and ask your team to never send out a document without having checked all of these items, this would be an option. Also, you can enforce double checks so that you ask always, okay, before someone sends out something, that a third person or a second person, takes a look at it, because, 4 eyes always see more than 2 eyes. And I know it for myself, if I work the entire day or even like days or weeks on one document, you get kind of blind for the things that are left on right. So it's always helpful to ask another person to double check. And this is also something that you can enforce within your team in order to ensure high quality. And also you can define clear standards. So this means, for example, that you set up guidelines for the PowerPoint presentations, for the Excel models, where you say, okay, this is exactly how we want to do it. This is how we structure the boxes. This is how we structure the headlines, and so on, because this ensures some kind of consistency throughout the documents. And the 4th level is that you check the documents yourself, that you read through them as the last person and provide regular feedback. So this is how you can ensure quality, or these are some things that you can do to ensure high quality. And again, it's your task not to avoid 100% of the mistakes, but to make sure that the quality is high enough and sufficient. Then task number 4 is the stakeholder management. You see, as a project manager, you're not only responsible for the problem solving, for the planning, for the quality, but it's also important to manage all the important stakeholders on the project. So on a project, there are, several stakeholders that are important. So for example, the project manager on the client side, is probably at the beginning the most important person that you need to build a relationship with, because this is the person that you need to work together for the entire project. And of course, you need to build a relationship. You need to manage the person a little bit so that this works well. Sometimes you have very experienced project managers on the client side, then it's much easier to work with them. Sometimes you have less experienced people, then you need to invest a little more, bit more time, because they are not used to work with consultancies. But that's just how it is, and this is a very important task for you as a project manager, to manage these kind of relationships. Then, of course, you have the top management on the client side. You have important employees, like people in the middle management. You also have your own team, the experts, for example, the project partners. So there are many different stakeholders that you need to manage. Again, you don't need to manage everything, but you need to keep track that every relationship is actively managed. So what I like to do is that I have a list with all the important stakeholders that are on my project, and then I determine, okay, what kind of stakeholders do I take care of? So this means that I go for lunch regularly, that I write Christmas cards, that I call if they have birthdays, stuff like that. But I also distribute, for example, that the top management is probably more is probably more part of the partner management, and people on a more operational level can be handled and managed and dealt with on the operational levels in your team as well. So very important, build relationships and manage stakeholders from the very beginning. Don't wait until the end, because the earlier you start building a good relationship, the better it is for the collaboration on the project. And then task number 5 is the project administration. And yes, this is something, that's not very fancy, but it has to be done. This is, not a task where you can win, you only can lose, because this is just, the back office work that you have to do as a project manager. For example, writing invoices, doing the travel organization, tracking the budget, then planning team events as well is a huge part. Then time tracking, making sure that the people fill out the feedback forms and so on. So these are the tasks, that you just have to do. I think the easiest way is to block a time, probably a Friday afternoon if you have the time there, to do all of the stuff and do it in a block, because again, it doesn't really contribute to your project success, but it's important that you do them, that you don't forget them. So block some time and make sure that you do them regularly. And then task number 6, and this is one of the most important tasks that you have again, it's that you take care of the personal development of your team. I cannot emphasize enough how important that is. You see, if you read through all the meme sites on the internet, then very often, people make fun of the situation that, senior management doesn't really care about consultants. But I think, quite the opposite is the case. So at least based on my experience, the project managers and the senior staff really try to take care a lot about the development of the consultants. And based on my experience, what really works, if you actively take the time to have these discussions, to have these times and slots where you take care of the personal development. So what I like to do is that I schedule a 30 minutes meeting every Friday with each of the members of my team, where we really answer some questions. For example, how did the last week go? How can I support you more? What do we want to work on together? And these are some very simple questions, but if you block the time every week or every second week, this makes sure that you have regular touch points, that you have the time, to give advice, to share your experiences, because you shouldn't forget that as a project manager, you are the most senior guy on the project, besides the partners, of course, and you have the most experience. So, your people, your team, they cannot know everything. That's very important. And you as a project manager also have to be a kind of mentor and give them advice and give them support so that they can improve as well. And you will see that this is the best thing that you can do in order to lift the overall project performance. So these are 6 things that you have to do as a project manager in terms of project management. 6 important tasks. If you can think of other tasks that are important that I have not included here, then please write it down in the comments. Also, if you want to learn the basic consulting skills, then check out my free masterclass in the links below. And with that being said, if you liked the video, then please subscribe to this channel. Also leave a thumb up, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Hope to talk to you soon. Goodbye, Johannes.